The knock echoed through my small apartment like a judge's gavel. Heavy. Final. I knew who it was. My blood ran cold. I hadn't slept in days, the ever-present weight of my debt a suffocating blanket. The incessant phone calls, the threats, they all culminated in this. I considered not answering. Maybe if I stayed quiet, the monster at the door would simply go away. But deep down, I knew it was a futile hope. This wasn't going away. This was the inevitable end to my terrible choices. The doorknob rattled, sending shivers down my spine. The man standing on the other side was a brute. Built like an oak tree, his face was a roadmap of hard living, etched with the harsh lines of countless threats and collections. He wore his ruthlessness like a cheap suit. This was Bruno, and he was here for his due. "You know why I'm here," Bruno growled, his voice a low rumble that promised violence. I felt a tremor of fear course through me. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry, my words caught in my throat. I don't have it all right now, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. I knew it was a weak defense, a flimsy shield against the storm brewing in Bruno's eyes. The air crackled with tension. Bruno's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think I'm stupid, Davy boy?" He sneered, taking a menacing step closer. "You've had your chances." The stench of stale cigarettes and cheap cologne wafted from him, suffocating me. Desperation clawed at my throat. I backpedaled, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Give me a little more time," I pleaded, my voice edged with panic. "Just a few more days, I swear I can get it." Bruno's patience, it seemed, had reached its limit. He grabbed me by the collar, lifting me effortlessly off my feet. "You're out of time," he snarled, his face contorted with rage. My eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an escape. I saw a glint of metal on my workbench in the corner. A wrench, my only chance. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged for it, my fingers closing around the cold, hard steel. Bruno laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "What are you going to do with that, Davy boy? Fix your debt away?" He tightened his grip, cutting off my air. I was losing consciousness. Mustering every ounce of strength I had left, I brought the wrench crashing down on Bruno's head. The sound of metal meeting bone echoed through the room. Bruno's eyes widened in surprise, then glazed over. He crumpled to the floor, his lifeblood staining the worn carpet. I stared at the scene, my chest heaving. I had never killed a man before. The weight of my actions crashed over me, a tidal wave of nausea and dread. What had I done? A low guttural cough escaped Bruno's lips, pulling David from his horrified stupor. He watched in disbelief as Bruno, with a Herculean effort, reached into his jacket. He pulled out a switchblade, the polished steel glinting under the dim apartment lights. "You should have paid," Bruno rasped, his voice a strained whisper. With a flick of his wrist, he pressed the blade into David's leg, severing his femoral artery with practiced ease. He chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, filled only with pain and vengeance. David crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg in vain. Blood poured through his fingers, staining his skin a gruesome crimson. He looked at Bruno, his vision blurring at the edges. Bruno simply stared back, a chillingly satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Now we're even, Davy boy," he whispered, his voice fading with each passing breath. The light in his eyes flickered, then died, leaving behind a vacant shell. The silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the gurgling sound of blood escaping David's wound.
Days turned into weeks, and the silence in David's apartment remained unbroken. The air, thick with the metallic scent of blood, hung heavy and oppressive. Flies buzzed around the decaying bodies, their incessant drone a macabre symphony. Mrs. Henderson, David's elderly landlady, hadn't seen or heard from him in days. She found his silence unusual, disconcerting. He was always late with the rent, always full of excuses, but he usually at least had the decency to answer her knocks. She knocked again, louder this time, her knuckles rapping against the peeling paint of the door. "Mr. Miller, are you in there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Only silence greeted her. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. A wave of nausea washed over her as a putrid odor wafted from beneath the door. It was the smell of decay, of death. Panic clawed at her throat, choking her. She stumbled back, her hand instinctively reaching for the necklace she always wore, a silver crucifix passed down from her grandmother. Mrs. Henderson fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling so violently that she could barely dial the numbers. "Hello? Police. I think something terrible has happened," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. As she spoke, a chilling realization dawned on her. It was the silence of death. And for the first time, she noticed the dark, viscous liquid seeping out from under the door, staining the hallway floor a horrifying crimson. The phone clattered to the floor, its screen going dark. Mrs. Henderson sank to her knees, her eyes wide with terror, the silver crucifix clutched tightly in her hand. The only sound in the hallway was the rapid thudding of her own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence of death. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the core that she was not alone.